Welcome to Walking the Earth. Today we are in Lumbini, in the Mahayana monastic zone of the Lumbini Sacred Garden, in Nepal's Terai section, right on the border of India and Nepal. So it is a steamy, humid monsoon day, thunder in the background. Perhaps the skies will open up again soon. We are next to a beautiful lotus pond on a bridge leading up to a Mahayana temple within the Vietnamese expression of Buddhism. It's a Vietnamese Mahayana temple, I should say. It looks abandoned from here. And so I'll just briefly tell you a little bit about what I know about Vietnam and their Buddhist tradition. And there's so much to learn. So Buddhism, it spread out of the Middle Lands, and it took a land route up into what is through the Gangetic Basin up into the Indus River Valley, and then up through the Punjab into Kashmir and across Central Asia into China. And then from China it spread into, this is about 1900 to 2100 years ago, about 2000 years ago, Buddhism enters China. And then a little bit later, it's going to spread about, I believe, the 500s to the 700s. We see it expanding into Korea and then Japan and then into Tibet. Perhaps some of it entered a little bit earlier. And then it's going to spread by land from China, from northern China down into southern China and then into Vietnam, because Vietnam, the northern part of Vietnam, was ruled by China for about 1,000 years. And we also see an expansion of Buddhism going southward from the middle lands of Bihar and UP and the Terai of Nepal down through southern India across the Deccan. It goes to the Kanheri caves and Baja and Karla caves and the Ellora and Ajanta caves of Maharashtra. We see it expanding into Orissa and down into Andhra Pradesh, and then down into Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, Kerala, into Sri Lanka, and then it's spreading up into Southeast Asia, like Myanmar, Mon territory on the border of Myanmar and Thailand, and then into Cambodia, which was Khmer territory. Now, initially, when Buddhism enters into these areas, like the Khmer territories, what's now in Cambodia and Thailand, there were already many Hindus in these regions, and then they become Mahayana Buddhist, some of them. And then it's spreading, we see there's another Hindu kingdom in southern Vietnam, the Cham people. And there are beautiful Hindu temples still existing up in southern and central Vietnam. Many of them were destroyed during the Vietnam War by the bombing raids. And this was a crime against humanity, besides the human loss, just the human cultural loss. But we see various expressions of Buddhism moving into Vietnam by sea, by land, coming out of Srivijaya Kingdom, which was in Malaysia, southern Thailand, and in parts of Indonesia, Sumatra, Java, etc. These various Hindu and Mahayana Buddhist kingdoms sending influences up into Vietnam, because these areas were all part of Greater India culturally. So an expansion of many Indian concepts and also seed lines into Southeast Asia. So Vietnam starts to move into a Mahayana expression very early on, and also had influences from the Taoist tradition and Confucian tradition. So it was much more Chinese influenced in a certain sense in the northern areas of Vietnam, and in the southern areas much more Indian influenced. But both had Mahayana expressions, whereas the rest of Southeast Asia, of mainland Southeast Asia, and particularly in Myanmar, Thailand, Cambodia, begin to transition into a Theravada expression over time, which does exist within Vietnam, according to my understanding, but not as much as the Mahayana. So Mahayana tradition has been present in Vietnam for well over 1,500 years, perhaps in some of the more Chinese influenced areas moving back even further in time. So I wanted my direct knowledge of the Vietnamese tradition of Mahayana Buddhism is limited, but is strong in the sense that I read early on a couple books from Thich Hahn, the great Zen monk from Vietnam, who later, because of the war, he spoke out against the war. He was a practitioner of ahimsa, of nonviolence, and he winds up moving to France, where he sets up Plum Village, a monastic institution where many Westerners have become Buddhists through that. And he's written many books, Living Buddha, Living Christ. That's one I read, and then one that I didn't read entirely through, about the life of the Buddha. And I've skimmed through a number of his books and have a lot of respect for him. And what in his struggles. So the Zen tradition is still very present within Vietnam, and many people aren't aware about the Zen tradition being strong there. And I believe that came out of the Southern school of Zen, but you can correct me. I mean, these are things I'd like to read a really good, thoroughgoing history of the Zen tradition at some point, of Chan, because it was called Chan in China, and it's Zen once it gets to Japan, but it has expressions in Korea, in Vietnam, and it even had a big influence on Tibet early on, according to the histories. The word Chan and Zen originate from Central Asia through the Sanskritic from dhyana, which has its close association with the word jhana within the Pali tradition. So jhana, dhyana, shan, Zen are all they're all related to absorption meditation, sitting meditation, and going into absorption states. So I just wanted to share a little bit about this. It's not a very long introduction to the Vietnamese expression of Mahayana Buddhism, but I hope that gets you interested in maybe looking deeper, because there's much to learn from the Vietnamese people, and there's some very, very interesting architectural expressions and religious and spiritual expressions. And the contemplative tradition is very deep there. And it's worthy of intensive study. And it would be interesting perhaps to do a comparison of Zen in its Vietnamese expression compared to, say, the Korean or Japanese expressions. That might be an interesting comparative study. So I'll go ahead and draw this one to a close. But until then, be happy.